just to summarize what we've heard a lot of over the last several months since we've announced the Governance Academy, and pretty reinforced a number of these points, are that organizations and executives are really looking for that consistent framework, not only for outsourcing, but shared services and that hybrid or that blended sourcing environment. Obviously looking for the highest value out of your providers, whether they're internal or external. Really looking for the ability to adapt to change and to realign things externally and internally as that change inevitably occurs. And then also, as Phil mentioned, we have transitioned or are transitioning out of a more cost-contained mentality into more of a growth mentality. And we are really looking for, most organizations are looking for an environment that fosters more of that innovation and positive growth. So on the next slide, just very quickly, a few of the typical challenges that we see kind of over the years and get reinforced over and over again is to make sure that we've got the level of competence across all of our governance groups and across the organization. And as you see there in the notes, many times we've observed individuals making the difference in an outsourcing relationship or in a shared services environment, and really holding things together through good times and bad. Unfortunately, those heroes can't scale. And so organizations are really looking for the opportunity to make sure that their bench strength, or that they have more bench strength and competency across all of the different places where outsourcing and shared services are used. They're also recognizing the fact that we really can't have governance organizations doing their own thing. So there really needs to be a level of consistency across the enterprise. So as you go from one governance group to the next, you've got a level of consistency. Continuity, nobody hangs around for the term of the deal or for the life of a shared services center. So as people come and people go, how do we address this continuity over time and really make that happen? The other piece then is, as we talked about, a lot of organizations really looking for that consistent framework in order to have that common philosophy, a consistent vocabulary, and it really improves that communication and how they do business. So all that to say, on the next slide, excuse me, so this is really why we founded the Governance Academy. It's really based on a lot of feedback from executives like Pradeep and other executive council members to meet their specific needs or a perceived need in the market. And so what we really want to do as our mission statement is to help improve the management of outsourcing, shared services, global business services environments, to provide a lot of the tools and capabilities and best practices that have been around for a number of years. But prior to this, you could only figure it out by yourself or have to engage an external consultant, which can be pretty expensive. So what we're doing in this program is to establish that governance framework that organizations can adopt that focuses not just on outsourcing, but that blended sourcing or hybrid environment, providing those tools to do capability assessments and maturity assessments in the organization. We'll get into this in terms of offering a tiered structure because everybody doesn't need to be at the same level of proficiency. And then obviously we're providing training that is associated with that curriculum that really builds on that program. So once again, really intended to either jumpstart or augment the governance framework that you already have in place in your organization. The next slide, we have the certification program. So we've gone over the governance framework and the relationship management framework, which are really integrated in this content. But then we get to the certification and the training curriculum that is a result of the input that we've gotten. So we've gotten a lot of input from our sourcing executive council members and a number of other organizations since we've announced the Governance Academy. and this type of framework has been validated with them. And so we have structured this very similar to a Six Sigma certification and training program where you have a tiered structure. You have yellow belt in this case where you're really understanding the fundamentals of outsourcing and shared services environments and the management of those. You have green belt that gets into the skills at a greater level of detail. You have black belt that takes you up another notch that gets into multi-provider governance. And then master black belt, we're going to go through these in a little more detail, that really is an enterprise level resource for organizations to look broadly across the enterprise, make sure that the governance capability is there, and look to integrate it with other programs. So if we could advance to the next slide that really get into the yellow belt, we focus here on relationship and management governance fundamentals and making sure that everybody is on the same sheet of music in terms of how do we govern and manage these blended sourcing environments. So as you see on the left-hand side under the key topics, we go through those fundamentals and the different types of business-to-business relationships, how the behaviors and expectations and priorities vary and how to get alignment there. We look at the role of governance. Why do we do it? What's its function? And what is the functionality that needs to be provided in governance? We talk about decision rights, which establish the role and authority of governance and what they really need to be doing and how they interface with the other key stakeholders and constituents. We go through in detail several of the basic governance processes and talk about those and how they should be designed. Obviously about the staffing and skills and attributes that those groups need to have, and then basic reporting requirements. What should we be reporting and to whom? So this, the Yellow Belt certification course is really designed for all members of your governance team, the retained organization, some of the functional area management, those process owners, everybody that has an interface with either the shared services center or the outsourcing provider would benefit from this kind of basic level of knowledge of relationship management and governance. On to the green belt, this is where we delve in a little bit more detail into those governance concepts and talk a bit more about the application. In this case, we're introducing additional models about relationship management and how to do a more accurate assessment and alignment. We want to make sure that everybody, particularly that's working with outsourcing, understands the underlying methodologies. So how does pricing methodology work? What's an ARC? What's a ROOK? And how are those structured? Same thing for service levels, earn backs. And then the next bullet that you see there is understanding how to use the terms that are in those very complex agreements, highly negotiated agreements. How do you leverage your understanding of those methodologies and those terms to positively impact performance with your providers? So we're going to go through that. We also get into more detail about the remainder of the 24 or so governance processes, talk about the importance of knowledge repository, advanced reporting, and then transition governance. If you have a new shared services center or a new outsourcing relationship, how do you align things at the onset and make sure that you're in good shape going forward? Once again, the kind of people that need to attend this or this is targeted for are those governance team members, retained organizations, and folks that have interaction with those service providers, whether they're internal or external. At Black Belt, this is shifting the focus a little bit. As you noticed in the yellow and the green belt, we're leaning a little heavier on the governance or governing the providers and the delivery centers and the fundamentals. As we get into Black Belt and Master Black Belt, we're leaning a bit heavier on affecting change internally or being more proactive and intentional about affecting that change within the organization. And so the types of things we're going to get into are, how do you conduct a joint planning session, whether you're doing that with an external provider or an internal business unit? How do you leverage the tools that we learned in Yellow Belt and Green Belt to realign or remediate a troubled relationship? We'll provide tools on how to more effectively do stakeholder analysis. Who are your stakeholders? What do they see as value? How do you communicate with them? We'll introduce you to a model of the 5 different types of value and how you drive value in these relationships. We'll talk about multi-provider governance from an organizational perspective and a number of other perspectives and pros and cons of different design. We'll get into measurement models outside of service levels. What are those other things that you really need to be measuring? We'll talk about cycle time optimization. As you get more and more mature in your governance capability, how do I improve my cycle time for how long does it take to remediate or resolve a high priority issue, or to process an invoice, or to process a contract change request, those types of things. So this is where we have the audience for this is kind of governance team leads, particularly for larger or more complex team leads, folks that are managing multiple service providers or shared services centers. We're focusing a lot internally here, so relationship managers, and also representatives in PMO organizations. So if we advance now into Master Black Belt, once again, hopefully you're seeing the progression of building from the fundamentals to these much more advanced concepts in governance, not only, once again, of outsourcing, but these very complex environments. And so in the Master Black Belt, as I mentioned before, this is an enterprise-level resource, has a lot of credibility within the organization, and really helps in the assessment of the enterprise-level capability, understanding the abilities or weaknesses of each governance team, and how do we improve that? How do we manage those governance teams as a portfolio of assets and make sure that they're up to par? So we'll get into topics of advanced governance design. We understand at this level that you're talking strategic supplier management, and your sourcing delivery, whatever that happens to be, is typically at some point integrated into a vendor management organization or a category management for procurement. And so we'll talk about how to do that, how to blend or integrate this capability that you've developed into a broader sourcing process that many organizations have, and Pradeep touched on this. I thought was great. And your overall strategic supplier management program. We'll get into advanced tool enablement, as Tom was saying on my bio. Got a lot of experience there around tools and enabling technologies for governance. So we'll talk about that, talk about automation, workflow, business intelligence, and analytics, and what you can do from a governance perspective to really drive a lot of value. We'll get more into change management. We'll talk quite a bit about innovation program management. What are the components of an innovation program? How do you do ideation? How do you do solution development? And important for a lot of these outsourcing deals, how do you then commercialize that innovation? So we'll go through pieces of that. And then as you see on the right hand of the slide, obviously the senior level governance team leads, those that head up GBS organization, manage multiple providers, PMO, VMO, those types of resources are really appropriate here. So on the next slide, we understand that it is extremely difficult to get an entire governance team together for training. And we've obviously structured the certification program at the individual level. And so what we really wanted to do is to offer as much flexibility as possible while maintaining a consistent curriculum and set of content across these different delivery methods or mechanisms. So we have the traditional instructor-led, classroom instruction. We can do that on-site with your organization, and typically that involves some level of customization based on what kind of governance framework you already have in place. We also have facilitated online, which is more of a web-based instruction. We try to keep the classes to around 15 or less students so we can have some interaction, some collaboration, sharing of best practices, and so on. And then for the ultimate in flexibility, we have pre-recorded videos for the entire set of curriculum that's self-paced. Literally all you need to have is either a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop with a browser and high-speed access, and you can go through the entire course content and learn these concepts. And so at this point, we've got the Yellow Belt certification released and available for that. The other question that we've got a lot is around the certification requirements and awards. Not going to spend a huge amount of time, but on the next slide, you'll see some of those certification requirements. The point is that we want to not only make sure that you have an understanding of the concepts and the models, but that you understand how to use them, and you have enough experience under your belt to really apply those tools and techniques that we present and we talk a lot about during the course. And then ultimately, as you take the certification exams for the various levels, and for Black Belt and Master Black Belt, we have projects that are required for submission and approval. Once you pass those, you're going to get an HfS Governance Academy certification for that appropriate level. You can, put it up on your wall, but you'll have a record, and we'll keep a record. So if you are going to another organization and need to demonstrate a certain level of proficiency, you'll have that and available to show them.